What was the greatest nightmare of slaveholders in early America? Not economic ruin or foreign invasion, but the sight of a black man armed and fighting for his freedom. For generations, that vision haunted white America, shaking the very foundations of its false power. Yet, what terrified the oppressors inspired the oppressed, proving that courage and skill know no color. This is the story of black soldiers whose presence alone challenged white supremacy, whose discipline and defiance carved out dignity, and whose legacy still commands respect. These are the black soldiers that terrified white America. In the summer of 1791, on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, the night carried a heavy silence broken only by drums and thunder. A group of enslaved men and women gathered under torchlight at a voodoo ceremony in Bois Cayman. Their lives had been carved by brutality, their bodies scarred by lashes, their humanity denied every day. That night they made a vow. They swore they would fight for freedom at any cost. Within days, plantations burned across the northern plains. Enslaved Africans, once chained to sugar mills and fields, rose in a fury that sent panic racing through the richest colony in France. This was the birth of the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in world history. The white planters of Saint-Domingue had lived in obscene luxury, commanding 500,000 enslaved Africans to produce sugar, coffee, and indigo that filled European markets. Suddenly, their world was reversed. Armed with machetes, torches, and righteous anger, black rebels attacked estates, cut down overseers, and set the grand houses ablaze. The night sky glowed red from burning mansions. Families who once believed themselves untouchable fled to the ports, spreading stories of terror as they sailed away. Some whispered of charms and rituals that made the rebels invincible. To the enslavers, it seemed like the natural order had collapsed. Those they called property were now their executioners. The uprising did not fade. It grew. Out of the chaos rose Toussaint Louverture, once enslaved himself, now a strategist whose brilliance rivaled Europe's finest generals. He turned scattered bands into a disciplined army, and his men defeated one foreign invader after another. Spain tried to seize the island. Britain sent its redcoats. All were beaten back. Many of Toussaint's soldiers fought barefoot, carrying farm tools turned into weapons, yet they humiliated professional armies. France, desperate, promised freedom to those who would switch sides, but the rebels had seen enough false promises. They demanded liberty, not bargains. Napoleon Bonaparte, rising to power in France, could not accept a black republic. In 1802, he sent a massive fleet under his brother-in-law, General Leclerc, to restore slavery. The campaign was savage, even when Toussaint was tricked under a flag of truce, captured, and shipped to a French prison to die. The rebellion did not break. Leaders like Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe carried the struggle forward. Dessalines, fueled by a hatred of bondage, vowed that no French oppressor would survive on Haitian soil. The fighting became a war of survival, both sides committing horrors, but for the rebels, it was vengeance for centuries of inhumanity. By late 1803, disease and guerrilla warfare decimated the French. At the Battle of Vertières, black troops shattered what remained of Napoleon's expedition. On January 1st, 1804, Dessalines declared the independence of Haiti, the first black republic. He ripped the white section from the French tricolor, leaving only blue and red. The message was unmistakable. Haiti would never again bow to white masters. Soon after, Dessalines ordered the killing of remaining planters to ensure they could never return. It was brutal, but it was also final. The age of slavery on Saint-Domingue was over. Across the Americas, Haiti's victory was electric. To the enslaved, it was proof that chains could be broken. To white slaveholders, it was a nightmare come alive. Refugees flooded into U.S. ports, telling tales of burning estates and merciless black soldiers. In states like South Carolina and Virginia, planters trembled. They tightened patrols, drilled militias, and passed new laws to prevent the spirit of Haiti from spreading. Some banned the importation of Africans from the Caribbean altogether. They feared that whispers of Toussaint's name could turn into rebellion in their own fields. The U.S. government's response revealed its own fear. President Thomas Jefferson, himself a slaveholder, refused to recognize Haitian independence. For decades, America treated Haiti as a pariah. To acknowledge it would mean admitting that black people had risen in arms, destroyed European armies, and created a free nation. That truth threatened the entire foundation of slavery in the United States. Newspapers fueled white panic, publishing lurid and racist accounts of Haitian vengeance. Any hint of black resistance was now described as a step toward another Haiti. Yet for black Americans, Haiti was a beacon. Free black communities in the North held celebrations, parades, and prayers honoring Haiti's triumph. Even in the South, enslaved people caught wind of what had happened. Whispers passed from cabin to cabin about a black general who had defeated Napoleon himself. These murmurs stoked dreams of freedom. David Walker, the radical abolitionist, later called Haiti the glory of the blacks and the terror of tyrants. His words carried the truth. Haiti was living proof that black people could rise and win. The influence spread quickly. In 1800, Gabriel Prosser, an enslaved blacksmith in Virginia, plotted a rebellion involving hundreds of enslaved men. Though informants betrayed him before it could launch, the fear his plan generated was profound. The example of Haiti was already alive in his vision. Southern states reacted by cracking down harder. Teaching enslaved people to read was outlawed with new intensity. Authorities feared that literacy would expose them to stories of Haiti's triumph. Black sailors and preachers were restricted in movement, suspected of carrying subversive ideas. The ruling class tried to silence the story, but it lived on in songs, prayers, and secret conversations. For white America, Haiti became a specter. A South Carolina official admitted the revolution had done more to alarm the southern states than any or all other causes. The myths of slavery, that black people were docile and content, had been burned to ash in the fires of Saint-Domingue. The fighters of Haiti had displayed discipline, intelligence, and resolve that no racist ideology could explain away. White America scrambled to rewrite the narrative, insisting Haiti was an anomaly, a disaster of French rule. But they knew the truth. They had seen what happened when black people were pushed too far and chose to rise. The Haitian Revolution left a legacy of both inspiration and backlash. For black people across the Americas, it was proof that oppression could be defeated. For white America, it was a prophecy of its own downfall. Haiti's independence was the first great crack in the chains of the New World, forged by black hands. Its echo would be heard for generations, in rebellions, in abolitionist movements, and in every dream of freedom. Haiti had shown the path, and that example terrified white America more than any foreign enemy ever could. On an August morning in 1831, the sun rose blood red over Southampton County, Virginia. In a small farmhouse, Joseph Travis and his family slept soundly, unaware that history was about to crack open their door. Outside, a man named Nat Turner moved quietly with a handful of enslaved men. He was not an ordinary bondsman. He was a preacher, literate, and believed he was guided by God. For years, he had waited for a sign. The night before, a strange eclipse had darkened the sky, and Nat read it as divine instruction. Now, with axe in hand, he struck the first blow. By sunrise, the Travis family was dead, and the deadliest slave rebellion in American history had begun. Nat and his band moved with grim resolve from one plantation to the next. Word spread quickly through slave quarters. Brother Nat is fighting back. Men who had prayed for freedom dropped their hoes and joined him. Soon about 50 stood at his side, armed with muskets, clubs, and farm tools turned into weapons. They rode when they could, walked when they had to, and forced their way into slave owners' homes before anyone could resist. No one was spared. Nat saw it as holy justice. He spoke of himself as God's chosen vessel, delivering punishment for the sin of slavery. Some hesitated at killing women or children, but Nat insisted there could be no exceptions. In his vision, everyone tied to slavery was guilty. The shock was immediate. White families woke to screams and gunshots, fleeing through swamps and woods. Panic spread faster than fire. By midday, militias and vigilantes were mustering across the county. At a skirmish near Jerusalem, the rebellion met its first organized resistance. Outnumbered and outgunned, some of Nat's men scattered, others died fighting. Nat himself slipped into the forests with a few loyal followers, determined to keep the cause alive. Then came the White Retaliation. For weeks, mobs rampaged through Southampton and neighboring counties. They killed indiscriminately. More than 100 black people were slaughtered, many with no connection to Nat's rebellion. Their bodies were hung in trees or left by the roadside as a warning. Plantation owners whipped and tortured survivors, desperate to reassert control. The rebellion itself had killed about 60 whites, but the vengeance afterward consumed far more black lives. Nat remained free for nearly 2 months, hiding in swamps, caves, and thickets, fed in secret by sympathetic enslaved people. Some whispered he had powers of invisibility, that God cloaked him from white patrols. In truth, he survived on berries and scraps, but his very absence deepened the terror. As long as Nat Turner was uncaptured, Virginia's planters could not sleep easily. Finally, in late October, he was found hiding in a dugout near a plantation. Chained and dragged to jail, he carried himself with calm conviction. He told his captors he regretted nothing. In November, Nat was put on trial in Jerusalem. The outcome was decided before he entered the courtroom. His testimony, recorded by attorney Thomas Gray, became known as the Confessions of Nat Turner. In it, Nat spoke of visions, of God commanding him to slay my enemies with their own weapons. He saw himself as an instrument of divine wrath. The court was unmoved. On November 11, 1831, Nat Turner was hanged. His body was flayed and quartered, displayed in grotesque pieces as a final warning. Yet instead of ending his influence, the act only immortalized him. For white Virginians, the nightmare had only deepened. Here was a man who had lived quietly among them, appearing pious and obedient, yet capable of orchestrating terror that shook their entire society. The name Nat Turner became shorthand for the lurking possibility of rebellion. White parents warned their children with it like a bogeyman. Legislators, shaken by how close Virginia had come to losing control, debated whether to end slavery altogether. A few suggested gradual emancipation, hoping to prevent another Turner. But in the end, they chose the opposite path. They tightened the system of bondage until it bled. New laws swept the South. It became illegal to teach enslaved people to read or write. The fact that Nat Turner was literate terrified them more than his visions. Black congregations could no longer meet without a white overseer present because Turner had preached in secret to his people. Free blacks saw their rights slashed, forced to leave or silenced from public life. What Turner's rebellion truly revealed was not black weakness, but white fear. The planters doubled down on oppression because they had glimpsed the truth. Enslaved people were not content, not docile, and not blind. They were watching, waiting, and willing to risk everything. Among enslaved African Americans, Nat Turner became both legend and lesson. In whispers, he was honored as a prophet who struck back against the beast of slavery. Some kept track of August 22nd, quietly marking it as a sacred date. Mothers told their children about a preacher who dared to fight. Yet his rebellion was also a warning. The reprisals had been devastating, the price unimaginably high. The stories passed through quarters carried both pride and caution. He had shown the way, but the risks were deadly. For the North, Turner's uprising ripped away Southern propaganda. Abolitionists pointed to it as proof that slavery was not a benevolent institution, but a powder keg of suffering. As one Northern commentator wrote, Nat Turner has shown that a spirit of insurrection sleeps beneath the surface of the South. For the South, It confirmed their darkest fears. Every enslaved man could now be imagined as a Turner in disguise, waiting for the night when the sun would rise red again. The paranoia would shape their laws, their violence, and their politics until the Civil War. The rebellion itself lasted less than 2 days, but its echo endured for decades. It hardened white determination to preserve slavery, even as it planted new seeds of courage among the enslaved. Nat Turner's life ended on the gallows, but the image of him standing unbroken in court, claiming his divine mission, could not be erased. His uprising was the living embodiment of slaveholders' nightmares, black vengeance made real. As America moved toward the Civil War 30 years later, Southern leaders remembered Southampton. They remembered how quickly the illusion of control could collapse when enslaved men chose to rise. The dread Nat Turner awakened never died, and in the coming conflict, that dread would be reborn on a scale far greater than Virginia's planters could have ever imagined. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation took effect. It freed enslaved people in Confederate territory and invited black men into the Union Army. For centuries, white America feared this possibility. Now it was here. Frederick Douglass urged his people to seize the moment. He declared that a black man with U.S. letters on his chest and a musket in his hand could never again be denied citizenship. Tens of thousands answered. They came from the South and the North, from free households and slave cabins, ready to carry rifles for liberation. The Confederacy reacted with fury. Jefferson Davis ordered that black soldiers captured in battle should not be treated as prisoners of war, but as criminals to be executed or re-enslaved. Confederate officers spoke openly of terror at the idea. General Howell Cobb admitted that if black men could fight, then the entire justification for slavery was false. His words exposed the truth. The very act of black enlistment undermined the foundation of white supremacy. At first, the Union hesitated. Black men were assigned to dig trenches, haul supplies, and cook. But war demands shifted. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment, formed in 1863, pushed for battle. That July, they led the assault on Fort Wagner near Charleston. Across an open beach, they advanced into cannon fire and musket volleys. They reached the walls and fought hand to hand before being driven back. Almost half the regiment was lost. Their colonel, Robert Gould Shaw, fell with them. Confederate soldiers buried him with his men in a mass grave, thinking it a slight. Shaw's family called it an honor. The 54th did not win the fort, but their bravery forced the nation to reckon with the black soldier as a symbol of loyalty and courage. Black regiments entered battlefields across the South. They fought at Milliken's Bend, where recently freed men held their ground against Confederate veterans. They fought at Port Hudson and Nashville. By the end of the war, nearly 180,000 black soldiers had served in the Union Army, about 1 in 10 of all troops. Another 19,000 joined the Navy. They fought under the constant knowledge that capture meant death. Some carried a last bullet for themselves rather than fall alive into Confederate hands. Hatred boiled over at Fort Pillow in Tennessee. In April 1864, Confederate cavalry under Nathan Bedford Forrest overran a Union garrison defended in part by black artillerymen. After Union troops surrendered, many black soldiers were executed. Witnesses reported cries of "no quarter" as Confederates shot men kneeling with their hands raised. The news spread through Union camps. Black regiments swore vengeance, and "Remember Fort Pillow" became their rallying cry. The massacre gave the war an even sharper edge. For black soldiers, it was not just national survival at stake, but personal justice. In September 1864, the U.S. colored troops stormed Confederate defenses at New Market Heights near Richmond. Under relentless fire, they charged fortified lines, climbed parapets, and broke through. 14 Medals of Honor were awarded that day. Confederate troops had been taught that black men could not fight. Watching them carry earthworks under heavy fire shattered that myth. For the Confederacy, it was a psychological wound as much as a military one. By April 1865, the nightmare of the South had become reality. When Richmond fell, black regiments marched into the burning capital. Freedmen lined the streets, weeping and cheering. Former masters watched in silence as armed black soldiers patrolled their city. A Confederate woman wrote in her diary that the world had been overturned. For those who once owned slaves, the humiliation was complete. For the enslaved, it was vindication. A week later, at Appomattox, Robert E. Lee surrendered. Black troops stood among the Union forces, cutting off his retreat. As Confederate soldiers stacked their rifles, they marched past lines of black Union soldiers standing at attention. There was no need for words. The simple sight was enough. The ideology that had sustained slavery had collapsed in front of them. The cost was high. Nearly 40,000 black soldiers died from wounds or disease. They had saved the Union and destroyed the institution that held them in bondage. Their sacrifices altered Northern opinion. Many who once doubted them now recognized their discipline and courage. Lincoln himself suggested voting rights for black veterans in his final public address. His words enraged his assassin, proof of how much power recognition carried in that moment. For the defeated South, the sight of black soldiers in uniform remained unbearable. During Reconstruction, many were stationed across the South as federal troops. Former Confederates had to obey the commands of men they had once enslaved. This reality gave rise to violent resistance. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan targeted black veterans precisely because they embodied strength and leadership. They were men who knew how to march, drill, and defend themselves. They represented a future that white supremacists were desperate to suppress. Despite terror, the legacy of black service endured. Families kept the memory alive. Churches read the names of local regiments. Boys marched in small parades, pretending to be soldiers like their fathers and uncles. Letters home from the front described pride in wearing blue, in guarding supply trains, in seeing freedom come to relatives still in bondage. These stories carried hope into cabins and kitchens. They showed that black sacrifice was not invisible, but etched into the nation's survival. The Civil War proved that black men could not only fight, but transform the war itself. They stood as evidence against the myths of slavery. They forced even enemies to acknowledge their bravery. They reshaped what it meant to be an American soldier. When the Union stood victorious, it stood because black soldiers had bled for it. The war ended slavery, but it did not end fear. The image of a black man in uniform with a rifle haunted white supremacists for generations. Yet for black America, it became a foundation of pride. The blue uniform was no longer just cloth. It was proof of courage, sacrifice, and belonging in a country that had tried to deny it. In 1866, just after the Civil War, Congress authorized 6 regiments of black soldiers. 4 were infantry and 2 were cavalry. Most who enlisted were veterans, freedmen looking for a future, or young men determined to earn dignity through service. They were promised steady pay, housing, and the respect that came with wearing a uniform, even though that respect was often withheld. White officers commanded them, and many doubted their worth. The doubts would not last. On the western frontier, these black soldiers proved themselves in battle, on endless patrols, and in every hardship the wilderness could deliver. The name that would define them came not from the army, but from their foes. Plains tribes, likely Cheyenne or Comanche, called them Buffalo Soldiers. The reason was their hair, their toughness, and their fighting spirit. The buffalo was sacred, strong, and relentless. The soldiers carried the name with pride. It marked them as warriors who had earned respect. Their regiments, the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, became symbols of black excellence in uniform. Their assignments were brutal. They guarded wagon trains, built forts, laid telegraph lines, and scouted deserts and mountain passes. They endured blistering heat, sudden blizzards, and equipment that was often broken or secondhand. Many white settlers refused them service in town. Local newspapers dismissed them as unworthy of uniform, yet their records showed the opposite. Buffalo Soldiers had lower desertion rates than white regiments and higher re-enlistment. They stayed disciplined because they had little choice, but also because the uniform meant something powerful. It was a claim to manhood that could not easily be stripped away. On the battlefield, their reputation grew. During the Red River War of 1874, the 10th Cavalry fought Comanche and Kiowa fighters across the Texas Panhandle, keeping supply lines open. In the deserts of the Southwest, the 9th and 10th hunted Geronimo's Apaches through canyons and mesas where few others dared to follow. The Apaches respected them enough to call out warnings before ambushes. Buffalo Soldiers were not invincible. They bled and they died, but they kept coming. Their persistence alone was enough to surprise and unsettle enemies who had seen white regiments falter. Some names stand out. Sergeant Emmanuel Stantz of the 9th Cavalry became the first black soldier after the Civil War to earn the Medal of Honor. In 1870, he led a small party that rescued kidnapped children in Texas after a sharp firefight. Others followed. By the end of the century, Buffalo Soldiers had earned at least 18 Medals of Honor. Lieutenant Henry O. Flipper, the first black graduate of West Point, rode with the 10th Cavalry. Despite prejudice and false charges that ended his career, Flipper showed that black leadership was possible within the Army, and young Lieutenant John Pershing, later commander of U.S. forces in World War I, served with the 10th Cavalry. His respect for his men earned him the nickname Black Jack. He carried it proudly, a testament to their skill. Their duties extended beyond war. In 1899 and again in 1904, Buffalo Soldiers were assigned to Yosemite and Sequoia. They fought wildfires, stopped poachers, and cut trails that tourists still walk today. They became America's first park rangers before the National Park Service existed. Visitors were sometimes startled to see black men guarding these natural wonders. Their work proved that their service was not only about war, but also about stewardship and nation building. When war came with Spain in 1898, Buffalo Soldiers sailed to Cuba. At San Juan Hill and Kettle Hill, they fought side by side with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. Popular history credits Roosevelt with the glory, but soldiers who were there remembered the truth. The 9th and 10th Cavalry covered the advance and were among the first to reach the heights. Roosevelt himself admitted that the black regiments were essential. Others, like Frank Knox, wrote that they had never seen braver men. Still, newspapers downplayed their role. Their sacrifice was clear on the battlefield, even if history books tried to bury it. After Cuba, Buffalo Soldiers were sent to the Philippines. There, they faced Filipino rebels who called out, "Why fight us? You're black like us." Some soldiers wrestled with the contradiction. A few even defected, like Corporal David Fagan, who joined the rebels. Most stayed with their regiments and fought with distinction. But the moral tension was undeniable. They were men who had endured oppression, now ordered to enforce it on others. Even with their record, racism dogged them. In 1906, the Brownsville affair showed how fragile their honor was in the eyes of white America. After a shooting in town, 167 soldiers of the 25th Infantry were discharged without evidence. Roosevelt's order ended their careers overnight. It took decades before their names were cleared. In 1917, tension in Houston exploded when the 24th Infantry clashed with racist police. Rumors of lynching sparked armed resistance. Shots rang through the streets, leaving policemen and soldiers dead. The Army executed 19 Buffalo Soldiers after rushed trials. These events revealed how little their service shielded them from injustice. Despite injustice, the Buffalo Soldiers endured. They became heroes within black communities. Stories of their battles were retold in churches and homes. They were proof that black men could serve with honor in the harshest conditions. They inspired pride in young boys and gave elders reason to hope. At the same time, they were constant reminders to white America that discipline and courage were not bound by race. Their very existence unsettled the lie of inferiority. By the early 20th century, Buffalo Soldiers had shaped the Army itself. Leaders like Pershing knew from experience that black regiments were as capable as any. They had fought on plains, mountains, and jungles. They had guarded the frontier, secured the parks, and faced prejudice without breaking. Their record became part of the argument for integration that would come decades later. The Buffalo Soldiers carved out a legacy that could not be denied. They showed that valor is not limited by color. They carried the name of the buffalo with pride because it marked them as strong, unyielding, and worthy of respect. In every patrol, every battle, and every act of duty, they struck at the myth of white supremacy. Their service laid the groundwork for the modern military and for the larger struggle for black equality that continued long after the frontier closed. In 1917, when the United States entered World War I, black Americans once again stepped forward to serve. More than 350,000 enlisted or were drafted. Most were placed in labor units, digging trenches or unloading ships, but nearly 40,000 eventually reached the front lines. Their service carried heavy weight. Every uniform they wore challenged a nation that denied them equality, and every rifle they carried reminded white America of the fear that had haunted it since slavery. The most famous of these men were the 369th Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters. They came largely from Harlem, though black men from across New York joined their ranks. Trained under hostile conditions at home, they faced constant derision from white officers who doubted their ability to fight. When they reached France, General Pershing loaned them to the French army, which welcomed them with respect. Issued French helmets and weapons, the Hellfighters were sent straight to the trenches. There they proved themselves in ways that astonished allies and enemies alike. The regiment spent 191 days in combat, longer than any American unit in the war. They never lost ground or a prisoner. Their reputation grew quickly after a night raid in May 1918. Two sentries, Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts, were ambushed by a large German patrol. Roberts was wounded early, leaving Johnson to face the attackers almost alone. Shot and bleeding, Johnson used his rifle as a club, then drew his bolo knife when surrounded. He fought with such fury that the Germans fled, leaving behind weapons and wounded. Johnson suffered 21 wounds but survived. For his valor, the French awarded him the Croix de Guerre with Palm, their highest honor. The story of Johnson, dubbed Black Death, shattered claims that black soldiers lacked courage. By the war's end, the entire 369th was decorated. The French awarded the unit a collective Croix de Guerre, and more than 170 men received individual medals. The regiment's band, led by James Reese Europe, introduced jazz to European audiences and became an international sensation. When the Hellfighters returned to New York in 1919, they marched up Fifth Avenue in a victory parade. Crowds filled the streets as black soldiers with medals on their chests strode proudly, cheered on by their community. It was a rare moment of recognition. That moment did not last. Across the country, white hostility surged. Many whites feared what these veterans represented. Disciplined men who had worn the uniform of the United States, seen the wider world, and gained confidence from their service. Southern politicians warned that military service would make black men uppity. Their warnings came true. Veterans returned determined to claim dignity. W.E.B. Du Bois captured this spirit in his famous essay, Returning Soldiers, where he urged them to fight for democracy at home just as fiercely as they had abroad. The reaction was swift and violent. In 1919, known as the Red Summer, more than 24 cities erupted in race riots. White mobs, often joined by white veterans, attacked black neighborhoods. In Washington, D.C., sailors and soldiers rampaged through the streets beating black citizens, but black veterans fought back with rifles. Gun battles raged until federal troops intervened. In Chicago, riots exploded after the killing of a black teenager at a segregated beach. White gangs invaded black neighborhoods, but black residents, many of them ex-servicemen, defended their homes. By the end, 38 people were dead and hundreds injured. In Elaine, Arkansas, black sharecroppers organizing for fair pay were attacked. The violence left over 100 black people dead. Across the nation, the pattern repeated. White mobs attacked, black veterans resisted, and America trembled at the sight of men who would not bow. The backlash extended to lynching. At least 10 black veterans were lynched in 1919 alone. Some were killed while still wearing their uniforms. In Georgia, Wilbur Little was murdered for refusing to remove his uniform after returning from war. His killers told him no black man would wear the nation's colors in their town. These acts of cruelty revealed how deep the fear ran. For many whites, the sight of a black man in uniform symbolized the collapse of the racial order they clung to. Despite the violence, black communities honored their soldiers. Churches held banquets, newspapers printed photographs of decorated men, and children were told stories of their bravery. The Harlem Hellfighters became a source of enduring pride. Their triumph overseas and their defiance at home marked the rise of what was called the New a generation unwilling to accept silence and submission. The military itself lagged behind. Segregation remained in place, and recognition was rare. Henry Johnson, despite his heroism, died poor and largely forgotten in 1929. Only decades later did the United States finally award him the Medal of Honor. Yet his legacy, and that of the Hellfighters, lived on. They had shown that when black men carried arms in defense of freedom, they were as formidable as any soldiers on earth. The end of World War I did not end the struggle. Instead, it deepened it. The Harlem Hellfighters and their peers proved that black soldiers could not only serve, but excel. Their return sparked fear, resistance, and bloodshed, but it also fueled pride and determination within the black community. The uniform they wore was both a shield and a target, but it left no doubt. Once again, white America's deepest nightmare had walked home with medals on its chest. If you value these truths, please don't let them fade. Subscribe to Black Culture Unlocked, share this video, and keep the conversation alive. Our ancestors fought for dignity with blood and fire. The least we can do is remember, speak their names, and carry their legacy forward.